conceptualize what you're telling me, and this is actually something that kind of hit me in a way that I've never heard before, which is so interesting. Like, you presented it really well. And basically we have this libido. It wants to get itself out. The kind of purpose of this libido is nature is trying to get us to reproduce. In the most basic sense, this is the work of life. You know, it's quite an obvious thing. And maybe we can have all these mental neuroses and doubts and insecurities about our position in society, but as long as we're reproducing, it's all right if you're a disaster. I believe this is the sort of idea of Reich and all that. So, but the problem with nowadays is that through basically what we're talking on right now, this techno stuff, we've got all this creative energy. Obviously, its most basic form is creating babies, but then it can turn into creating energy for food or from food or like, you know, bonding and relationships, and then all the way up to intellectual, artistic stuff up in the head. But we, through, I guess you could say, our astral sphincter up here on top, we're projecting a huge amount of that libido into the internet, and it's actually starting to be to the detriment of our body. We're starting to kind of shrivel up as bodies. Everybody's literally like shrivel up. Literally, you're seeing erectile dysfunction rise. You're seeing inceldom just get insane. You're seeing the sort of pathologizing of sex getting insane. Like, we've talked about this before. The obvious miasma of the e-thought and the cam girls and porn especially, is that you've basically got these almost like weird, like they're like astral sponges that all these guys are getting up onto the internet, like millions of them across the world every day, and they're projecting that libido into this thing, and it's just absorbing it up and going really nowhere, maybe making some guy rich, but not much more than that. It's very impotent if you think about it. Like, how do you see all that? And obviously we can see why that's such a bad thing. It's like this tech sponge is sucking our souls out of us or something like that.
Big one, and this is one that I think is really frightening, and I think it'll strike at the people watching. Like, the dowager's hump is when your neck is craned ahead. That happens when you're on the computer naturally, when you're hunched over typing. In fact, the model of the father from Coraline, his neck is completely arched ahead onto the computer. That is the literal visualization of what I'm talking about. So, like, it's not that your penis can't get erect. It's that it's in the digital. Your head is moving into the computer, and eventually it'll be gone. Eventually your head's coming off and floating away. But I also think it's interesting that, because this is the same thing that we talked about when we were talking about Odin, and you described Odin as being in the sky. And I was saying, no, he's from the earth. He's pulling people down and he's coming out through the ground. And I view the internet as an underground. I think the internet's catonic. I think it's like deep underground. And I think people call it, they say it's, above. And, but almost the word itself, like, there's like the Ethernet, which gives you the internet. That is a misnomer in itself, because the idea of the ether is to be free and open and magical, but it's a net. It exists to trap things.
Yeah.
So it's like, is it the sky, or is it the thing that keeps you from getting to the sky?
That's a really interesting take. Certainly, that's a really interesting take. Oh my God, you said a lot of things there that I definitely want to dive into. So first of all, that idea of the hunched forward head, and then the eventual separation of the mind and the body. You think about the transhuman ideal, and I know a lot of people are very tech orientated, and this is always something they sort of say to me, is that I'm like, oh, that we've got a lot of problems, don't we, in the world, and maybe even you have a lot of problems yourself as a person. And they're like, yeah, but like one day we'll get CRISPR and we'll just end all bodily problems, and one day we'll just take this whole consciousness thing, get it out of this kind of piece of hunk of crap that we're carrying around, and zap, we're entering into the astral plane via the internet. The internet is the kingdom of heaven. And that's absolutely fascinating, because then when you're saying that idea of a net, it's almost like if you conceptualize heaven as this like magical place where God lives, and he invigorates everybody with ultimate creativity and power and all this. And then you think about the demiurge, the absolute opposite of that. That's like it's a net, it's a prison. It's almost like actually a Venus flytrap that tricks you into thinking that you're entering in heaven, but then it casts a web over you and pulls you down. And that's exactly what you're talking about with the internet. So So everybody is sort of like, we're going into this magical thing, and it grabs you, it pulls you in, and it sucks your potency out of you. And it's literally like we're in the early stages of how the Matrix was formed, where we all end up in pods, sort of disembodied in a dream. But it's the pod is, the machines are sucking our juice out of us to empower themselves in some sense. I'm gonna we gotta start it, bro. We gotta start an OnlyFans and get a load of girls so we can like suck all this juice and use it to become all powerful.
And Zizek recognized that as well. Like, this is not a new idea. It's not like the idea that everybody, or at least anybody who's a psychoanalyst, knows the Matrix is about machines taking your libido. But here's the really important part, because I'm sure there are some people who are like into tech who probably cringed at me talking about Ethernet, but I read the language, especially the consumer language of the internet, literally. Like, the Matrix. It is derived from womb. It is derived from the word for womb and for mother. Like, the Matrix is the matriarch.
Oh wow!
Like, really, it's the mater. It's the mother. And like, some of the symbolism that I see very heavily used, because another major feminine symbol is the spider. And where does this massive spider live other than the World Wide Web? And really, this I know.
God, that's so true. I can't wait till I send you that thing I was talking to you about, because that's one of the main symbols, is a feminine spider. That's amazing.
And I'm excited. And then I don't know if you're familiar with like Agamemnon. When Agamemnon returns home, he takes a bath, but his wife kills him by throwing a towel over him and stabbing him to death. And the poem specifically describes it as a net, that it's like he's caught up in a net. So the internet I view as this trap from which a devouring mother destroys you, feeds on your energy. So that feminine spider, that Clytemnestra, that demiurge. But I think even like we do have the demiurge, but I think that beyond the demiurge, it's even more nightmarish, because in Gnosticism, the idea is that beyond God, there is Sophia, who is like the pure, amazing, beautiful feminine that created God. But we have the equivalent with what's above the demiurge. We have this inverted, devouring feminine. And that is how I view the internet a lot, is a digital anima. Because, Nietzsche says it. He says the internalized energy, the internalized instincts became the soul. And of course, with Jung, we know the soul is the anima. Anima means soul in Latin. So where does that internalized soul put onto the internet? What does it do? It brings all the people's souls together and makes itself. It becomes this collective digital soul.